Hello and welcome to Sterling and VMware's Power Block session. I'm Megan Moore, Sterling's Director of Strategic Programs. We know your time is valuable, so I wanted to say thank you for choosing to spend a portion of your day with Sterling and VMware. Before we dive into the demo, I want to give you a brief overview of Sterling's capabilities. Sterling is a principal VMware partner and a preferred services partner authorized to sell and service VMware solutions to customers across the nation. We have 50 plus technical staff and 75 plus sales staff, all trained on VMware offerings. We are sure to provide you with the industry best value on all of your client to cloud IT needs. As you can see from this slide, we hold many VMware competencies, including two master services competencies and more coming soon. Next slide, please. Sterling offers complete customized solutions from client to cloud. We serve on multiple federal, state, local government contracts and support all industry verticals. Security is extremely important here at Sterling. We have a secure supply chain, robust secure supply chain, including OTIPs and CMMC certifications. For any questions about Sterling, please use the email aliases you'll find at the end of the demo. And for questions during the demo, please put them into the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen and we will address them at the end. Now I will turn it over to Enterprise Engineer Greg Stewart to talk to us about Horizon on VxRail.
Thanks, Megan. All right. So today we're going to talk about Horizon on VxRail. And these are both technologies that are fantastic. And I've had the pleasure of working with them for years now. And I am a self-professed VDI junkie. So this is going to be a good presentation. We really could have a demo that could last 5 or 6 hours to cover everything inside of Horizon. Because we have limited time today, this is going to be a little bit more of a 30,000-foot view of Horizon and VxRail. So please make sure to use the question and Q&A panel to ask some more questions. And then you can always follow up at the end of the slide. There'll be some email aliases that, like Megan alluded to, where you can ask some more in-depth questions and maybe even schedule a more in-depth demo. So I'd like to start off this presentation by talking about why choosing VxRail. So VxRail is a hyper-converged infrastructure solution, and it consolidates all the compute, storage, and virtualization with that end-to-end lifecycle management all within one chassis or all within one node. Secondly, it is jointly engineered by Dell and VMware, which is going to allow for that lockstep 30-day synchronous release with vSphere. And with other solutions, you'll have vSphere 6.7, and then the actual HCI solution will have a different software lifecycle. So with Dell and VMware jointly engineering this just makes it super simple from a management perspective. Less management overhead and administrative overhead for configuring and managing your upgrades for vSphere and for VxRail. And then lastly, it provides a single point of support for all software and hardware. So you're just calling one number instead of two different numbers, and you're getting the high-level support that you would expect from Dell and VMware for your VxRail. So here's just a quick overview of what one of the most commonly used nodes is. This is the E560F node. It's an all-flash node. And these nodes, actually, we have an 8-node cluster of these in our Sterling Solution Center. And these VxRail nodes, you can see the front and back there. On the front there, it just gives you a quick view of what the drives look like from the front side. The flashing lights there are giving you indications of what's going on, the health of the system. And then on the back, it gives you a sample configuration of what you can see and build out for your VxRail. So these have 4 onboard port NICs, and then there's a dual USB, and then there's a management NIC on the left-hand side there. That's for your iDRAC console port for management. 2 dual redundant power supplies there as well in the back, and then some slots for some other PCIe expansion cards if you need to add more to it. But that's just a basic overview of what the hardware looks like. Now we'll get more into the software side, and we'll start talking a little bit more about VDI and how Horizon provides that for you. So this is a very rough diagram. Overview diagram of what Horizon looks like. So at the very top, you have that colorful display there of a bunch of different users, and those users are coming into your VDI environment through a number of ways. They're either going to come in through the Horizon client, which is a thick client that's installable on top of your Windows 10 desktop or Windows Server desktop, or you can actually download an app, the Horizon Client app, in the App Store for iOS, and then in the Google Play and other Android stores as well. It's there. Alternatively, your users might be coming in through the web client. It's an HTML-based web client that you can access via any web browser on any endpoint that you have. So it just depends on what your users are comfortable with, or what you would like them to use. You have the option to push them towards one client or the other. So once they've come in through and they've authenticated, there's several different pieces that make up Horizon. A lot of moving parts here. So we'll start on the far left-hand side. You can see there's that Workspace ONE access. Workspace ONE is your single sign-on utility, and that's used to sign on users one time and give them access to the entire environment, applications, desktops, etc. So that's Workspace ONE. There's a lot more to it. There's Unified Endpoint Management, which used to be AirWatch. That's been married into VMware's Workspace ONE, and that is now there for you to do mobile device management through single sign-on as well. And then in the middle there, the middle chunk there is really the meat of the Horizon experience, and that is there's 3 different servers. There's a unified access gateway, a connection server, and a JMP server. So the unified access gateway and the connection server do essentially the same job. The difference being is that the unified access gateway is set in the DMZ. So it's public facing. It's going to get a different IP address and a different URL than you would see inside of the environment if they were sitting at the corporate office or location that you're working from, work office. And that's just for security's sake. So it used to be called VMware Security Server. It's now called the Unified Access Gateway, and you can set up redundant UAGs and have them load balanced. Just depends on the size and breadth of your deployment. Behind the DMZ, inside of your internal network, is going to be the connection server, and the connection server is the lifeblood of the VDI deployment, of your Horizon deployment. So without a connection server, there's no VDI. And the connection server does a number of things. It's where you can administer your view deployment. It's where you create desktop pools. It's where you check all your sessions, who's logged in, who's hung on a session. It allows you to do lots of administrative thing, and it also balances the connections coming in through the UAG or just coming in directly to the connection server, and hands out the desktops on an as-needed basis on demand. JMP server is a just-in-time management platform that's going to be a combination of instant clones technology and then unified endpoint management. Not a dynamic environment manager to manage your profiles, user profiles, mapping, printer mapping, file share mapping, etc., drive mapping. And those 3 things together, along with app volumes, creates that JMP just-in-time management platform. That server has been done away with in Horizon 8. It's now just actually instant clones. They're moving people away from doing linked clones and moving everybody to instant clones. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in the next few minutes. But your users are going to connect through there after they've authenticated, and they're going to be presented with a desktop pool. So when you create your environment for VDI, when you create your Horizon environment, you're going to start building out desktop pools. In each of those desktop pools, you have to entitle users enable for them to use the desktop. So let's start with the Windows 10 Instant Clone desktop pool there on the left-hand side of that white box on the bottom. So the Windows 10 Instant Clone pool there, if you have 10 users, you can put them in individually, entitle them to that desktop pool individually, or you can entitle groups. You can use group entitlements as well. So if your domain administrators group needs access to the Windows 10 Instant Clone pool, you can entitle the entire domain administrators group, so that when the domain administrators go to log in through the client of their choice, whether it's the web client, the app, or the thick client on their desktop or endpoint, they're going to be presented with this desktop pool, and when they launch it, they can pull down a desktop from that pool. So you can create many, many pools. It just depends on how big your environment is and how great the need is for desktops. So you can see here, they've given us an example of a Windows 10 instant clone pool, pretty standard. Then a Linux clone pool. You can actually do Linux desktops. And then on the right-hand side, there's the Windows 10 3D desktop pool. And that's going to be more for your power users. They're going to have 3D rendering, possibly NVIDIA Grid vGPUs for some really graphics intensive applications such as AutoCAD, or any other like Adobe Creative Suite, any like paint or art stuff that you would be doing. A lot of education organizations utilize GPU and stuff like that for their students that are using those graphics intense applications. And then on the right hand side of that, you also have the option of doing RDS, remote desktop session, and you can create an RDS. You can create an RDS farm. And those RDS desktops will have the applications and the operating systems writing together packaged for you. It just depends on how you want to configure it, really. More often these days, we're seeing most people going Windows 10 with instant clones, and VMware is really pushing people towards instant clones just because of the less overhead that you have with your instant clones. The machines get destroyed after they're disconnected and logged off. Dynamic Environment Manager saves all of the profile settings, so it gives you a persistent feel in a non-persistent desktop pool situation. So we'll shift now to talk a little bit about applications. So there's two types of applications that you can do, application tools that you can do inside of Horizon. One of them would be app volumes. You can see that on the upper right-hand corner there. And then on the lower left-hand corner, you see virtualized applications through thin app packages. Each of those are used to create virtualized applications. The app volumes is really more commonly used. And app volume is basically what you're doing is you are creating an application. You go through the process of installing an application on a provisioning virtual machine. And during that process, the app volumes manager is snapshotting all of the installation procedures and all the files for that typical, like Adobe Reader or Chrome, one of the more typical applications. And it captures the entire process, and then it puts it in, stores it inside of a VMDK file, which is just a virtual hard drive, so that when a user who's entitled to use that application launches a desktop, that app volume gets attached, that virtual hard drive gets attached to their VM, and then they're using the application as they would be if it was like a persistent thick install. So again, it cuts down on administrative overhead. And it makes it a lot easier to utilize applications like that. And again, and the whole idea behind this is to give your users a feel of a persistent desktop without having to manage persistent desktop and the overhead that comes with it. And then on the bottom right-hand corner there, you see the Dynamic Environment Manager shares. That's DEM. And what this is this is a feature inside of Horizon that allows you to create that persistent feel. So anytime users create a folder on their desktop or a desktop shortcut, or if you want the browser to act in a specific way, if you want to lock in their favorites or their bookmarks, all those things get saved through DEM file shares. And that DEM is linked back to your Active Directory group policy. So you create a set of group policies inside of your group policy manager on Active Directory, and then it syncs up with a file share, several file shares inside of DEM, and those two things work in tandem to create that persistent feel for the end user. On the right-hand side and on the very, very bottom in the blue bar there, you can see some of the core pieces of infrastructure that you need to run all of this, obviously. You've got to have a vCenter server. You've got to have a database, and you got to have Active Directory. VRail as Operations Manager for Horizon is optional, but that VRops for Horizon really gives you a very easy and complete way to monitor your solution as a whole, the health of it, any issues or errors, red flags. You can create custom dashboards inside of VRops and really watch and manage and monitor each one of the different aspects of your VDI environment. And then, like I said, on the bottom in that blue bar there is your VMware vCenter server. It's just crucial to have that. And then, of course, your vSphere hosts. Those would be your ESXi hypervisor hosts that you get. You install all of these virtual machines on top of. So this slide is a great slide that I use to give you an idea of how authentication work and kind of what the flow for a user is from start to finish, from logging in to actually pulling down a desktop. And again, this is very high level stuff. There's a lot that's actually going on in between these lines here, but if you would like to have a more in-depth conversation about the security features and functionality, ports and protocols, we can do that. You can just reach out through the email alias and we'll set that up. But on the far left-hand side is, again, we're talking, you have that Horizon client, and that Horizon client, again, is going to be your HTML web or your HTML-based web client on a web browser. It could be an app on your iPhone or Android. It could be on an iPad or a different kind of tablet. And then you could also be using just the thick installed Horizon client that's on your desktop or whatever laptop, whatever technology that you're using. So whatever client that the user decides to use, they're going to come in through that. They're going to enter their username and password on there. And the authentication is going to go through a load balancer. In a best practices kind of reference architecture, you're going to have a load balancer in front of your unified access gateways. That load balancer sits in front of your DMZ. And then it will connect into the DMZ to those unified access gateways. You can see in the middle there, those dark blue circles. And again, those are the security front end. So those kind of act as the first line of defense for security. And they will do some network address translation and pass through the user's request to authenticate to the load balancer that's inside of your corporate network that sits in front of your Horizon connection server. And again, this is more of a best practices architecture here. You may not have this many connection servers or access gateways, but this is what we normally see in a medium-sized deployment. And then those connection servers are then going to connect you to the backend. They're going to connect you through the connection server to the desktop pool that the user is asking to be presented with. And if they're entitled with it, they will be presented with a desktop pool. And then in step 2 there, you can see that once they're authenticated and their entitlement has been cross-checked, they're then in step 2 there in the orange number 2 circle, there's going to be the protocol that they access it with. So Blast Extreme is for web connections. If you're using the HTML-based web-based client, then you're going to be coming across the display protocol as Blast Extreme. If you're using the thick client or the app, you'll be using PC over IP, and that is another display protocol that's in use. That's a UDP. It's a connectionless display protocol to increase the amount of speed getting the feed coming through your desktop. So that is in a nutshell kind of how Horizon works from a flow perspective. I gave you a look at some of the core components and all the different moving pieces inside of the Horizon suite, and then how a user would log in, the flow and process of getting a desktop pulled down. So this is what we all came here to see. It's demo time. So I'm going to stop sharing this screen for a second here, and I'm going to pull up my demo here. Bear with me for a second. I'm going to share. Screen 1. Share. Okay. So at this point, you should be able to see now my what we're looking at here. And for the sake of time, I went ahead and logged into it, but this is what you are presented with when you log into your desktop, your Horizon Administrator Manager. So when you log into this is your connection server. This is the administrative side of it anyways. And in this connection server here, we've got several desktop pools. And we'll go back and look at the dashboard. The dashboard gives you an idea of, kind of use space and free space. Any system health issues will show up here, and then sessions down here in the middle on the bottom will show you, idle is the teal color here. Any idle desktop sessions or disconnected ones or active ones will show up here. And this is customizable. You can create and move these things around and create other counters that you'd like to see on here on the dashboard. If you have an events database set up, that stuff will show up here anytime somebody logs in, or anytime there's an issue, it will show up in your events database. And then the sessions portion here for monitoring will show you all of the current sessions that are running inside of your connection server. And what's great about that is if you have a session running and a user is having issues that their connection is hung or the system is locked up, as an administrator, you can go in here and click the checkbox on their session and either log them off, restart their desktop, or just reset the virtual machine altogether. If they're having issues, or if you're going to be doing some maintenance and you want to tell them, hey, make sure you save everything, you can actually send them a message that they'll receive in real time and be able to say, hey, in 5 minutes, we're going to be doing maintenance, please save your work and log off. Or you can just disconnect the session altogether. That happens sometimes where users will be connected to multiple sessions and it can start causing issues. So you can go ahead and disconnect the sessions that are idle. So of course, users and groups, you can create users and groups in here and entitle them, but the important part here is the desktops. So the desktop pools, there's several different desktop pools. There's an advanced one that has a lot more graphics options. And that's what we're going to look at today. So it'll give you your vCenter information down here, tells you how many machines that you have available and ready, the state of the pool, it's enabled, provisioning is enabled, and it shows you right here there's 9 entitled users and groups. So there's a lot you can do with this. You can go and do RDSH stuff. If you go to the farms section here, you have an RDSH farm. It tells you how many RDS hosts you have. You can also do applications through here. You can go and look at all of the machines that are connected. These are all the virtual machines, the virtual desktops that are sitting out there waiting to be connected to. So to focus on the desktops, I'm going to give you a demo of how this works. So if I go to the Horizon client, let me go ahead and let's see here. I'm going to log out, log back in so you can see it. But essentially, this is what it's going to look like when you put in the IP address of your connection server. If I put my IP address in with a /admin, it takes me to this administrator console. So if you want to get to be, if you're a user and you're using the web, the HTML client, you get to this page right here when you put in the IP address of the connection server, or it could be a fully qualified domain name as well. You're going to be presented with 2 options. So you can either click this option on the left here that you can install the Horizon client, and it will actually download and install the thick client onto your desktop or laptop. Or you can just click the VMware Horizon HTML access, and it will take you to the web client. So in the web client, once it gets loaded up here, I'll be able to log in. And this is what the web client looks like. It looks identical to the thick client, the installable client. It's just in a smaller box, and it's launched like an application. But I'm going to go ahead and log in here and show you what this looks like. Now, when I log in, I'm presented with all of the desktop pools that I'm entitled to use. So I can pull down a desktop from any of these 4 desktop pools. Additionally, these are all virtualized applications that I can launch, okay, that aren't tied to any specific operating system. They're just virtual applications. So I'm going to choose to go ahead and launch one in the advanced pool. And when I click on that, it goes right into the Windows thing. It's applying the dynamic environment manager policy. It's pulling down any saved profile items that I might have. And then it presents me with a desktop, and you can see that took about 7 to 8 seconds in total to pull down a desktop, and that's pretty good time. I'm connected over a VPN, and I'm out here in Idaho where there's a very limited bandwidth for ISP, so this is pretty quick, pretty snappy. And what it does, it will start launching things that are in my startup folder. It has Google Chrome here. Google Chrome is actually an app volume. It's attached now to my desktop session. And just to give you an idea how Dynamic Environment Manager works, if I were to right click on this and just go to and say, I want to create a new folder, and I'm just going to call it Greg test. Okay. I can then go ahead and create a new, let's go ahead and open that. I'm going to open this folder, and I'm going to create a new text file. There we go. Test one. And I'm going to go ahead and log off. Now, when I log off of this session, it's actually going to destroy the virtual machine. So I click sign out here. That virtual machine that I was just using, that virtual desktop, has been destroyed. It happens within a matter of seconds. The reason it does this is to keep your overhead low, to keep your disk space low, and only use it on an as needed basis. Okay. However, what happened was Dynamic Environment Manager saved the things that I just did in that desktop session to my profile back, through group policy settings and everything. It's been saved on a file share with my name on it. So I've got a folder and a file share with my name on it that's saving all of the settings through Dynamic Environment Manager. So if I want to go back to advanced, just to be totally thorough, I'm going to log out here so it doesn't cache any of my settings. Log in again. When I log in this time, it's going to give me a brand new desktop, one that I haven't used before. And with instant clones, it takes literally 2 to 3 seconds to spin up a virtual machine. And there's a lot more in-depth discussion we can have on that, but that's basically it in a nutshell. Again. So again, presented with all the desktops and all the applications that I'm entitled to use. I'm going to click that to launch a desktop in the advanced desktop pool. And it's logging me on like I'm logging on for the first time. Now it's applying the Dynamic Environment Manager policy. It's pulling down those settings from my profile in GPO. Okay. And once it decides to load here, there we go. And there's the folder that I created, right? And so inside of my folder should be my test document. There it is. Okay, so that's how it works. Now, if I was to delete that test document or create another one, I could log off and log back on and show you that it's still there. But these are all different virtual machines that get spun up every time that I log in. Okay, so that in a nutshell is how Horizon works. This is how VDI inside of Horizon works. There's a couple of moving parts. From this point forward, from Horizon 8 going on, really the star of the show is going to be instant clones with Dynamic Environment Manager and either app volumes for your application management or ThinApp. And depending on which route you choose, that's how you'll have it configured. Linked clones have been deprecated. You'll no longer be able to do linked clones in Horizon 8 because with linked clones, you needed a whole nother server called a composer server. They've done away with the need for that. They've turned the UAG, the Unified Access Gateway, into a virtual app. So that cuts down on the need for Windows Server licensing. So it's really going progressively towards instant clone technology, non-persistence across the board. Meaning that when you log on, you get a desktop. If you log off and don't save anything to your profile, then it gets blown away. And that's where Dynamic Environment Manager comes in. So that completes the demo of Horizon on VxRail. I'm going to share back the presentation here and see if there are any questions. We can go over those right now. So I'll turn the time back over to Megan.
Yeah, Greg, we do have a couple questions here.
Sure.
The first one is, what do you generally recommend when it comes to licensing Horizon with VxRail, OEM or volume specifically for Horizon? From a technical support perspective, I have heard that VMware Horizon support is better for the customer than Dell Pro support.
Yes and no. So I've seen it both ways. Some people have gone strictly OEM. In my opinion, I believe that volume licensing is better. Especially when you get into starting to want to do like app volumes with Microsoft Office and all those other applications that, volume licensing goes a lot better, and it's better from a support perspective. So I agree on that part.
All right, our next question is, what is the difference between thin app and app volumes?
Yeah, that's a good question. So both of them are application packaging technologies. So app volumes is a hardware based, it's a virtual hard drive based type of application. So when in order to create an app volume, let's just use Google Chrome for example. If I want all my users to have Google Chrome, but I don't want it installed on the master image, I'm going to put Google Chrome inside of app volumes. So I create an application package. And when I do that, I title it Google Chrome. I point it towards the installation files, and then it's going to ask me to click here to start provisioning, to put this into provisioning mode. Once I do that, it's going to ask me to go to my provisioning virtual machine in vCenter and launch it, and then start installing Google Chrome like I normally would on a desktop. During the time that I'm installing Google Chrome, it's kind of being recorded, if you can think of it that way. So the app volumes manager agent that's installed on that provisioning machine is monitoring all the installation process and capturing it inside of a virtual hard drive or a VMDK file. That VMDK file then exists on your storage array as Google Chrome app volume. So if you want all of your users to have Google Chrome, you entitle the entire user pool to have Google Chrome. So when they log in and launch a desktop, that virtual hard drive or that VMDK file gets attached to your virtual machine, and the user uses it. And when it's done, it gets detached and kind of goes back to the pool. So I like to think of, for analogy's sake, just to help understand better, I like to think of app volumes as kind of like a library-based scenario where you actually get the book. It gets put on in your cart. When you're using it, you sit down, you read it. When you're done, it gets put back on the cart and filed back into the shelf. Now, if we switch gears and look at ThinApp's a little bit different in how it works. So I like to use the analogy with ThinApp of Netflix. So ThinApp is more of a streaming type of application packaging. So similar process, you go through creating the application, you package it somewhat in the same way. And then as the user needs it, it's based on the bandwidth. So if the user gets entitled to a ThinApp, it will get connected to the virtual machine session as well, but instead it gets connected as a network file share that's coming across. And so it's kind of like Netflix. You pull down a movie, you want to watch Netflix, you scroll through, find the one you want, you watch it. When you're done, it just goes back into Netflix's cloud of movies, right? Similar to ThinApp. And the one feature that ThinApp really prides itself on is that if you have an application that is just one of those stubborn applications that is dependent on, running on Windows XP, for example, you can create that ThinApp, and you can create it to have the dependency of Windows XP, but it'll be running all inside the application. So you can essentially be running a Windows XP based application on a Windows 10 desktop without there being any conflict or anything, and vice versa. So if you have a Windows application that requires Windows 10, you can package it, but you're only using Windows 7 still for some reason, you can use that Windows 10 application on your Windows 7 desktops. So they're a little bit different. I've seen app volumes used a lot more than I have ThinApp, and but they both serve essentially the same purpose.
Great. And one last question here. How do my user files, shares, printer mappings, and profiles get loaded in Horizon?
Yeah, that's another question that always comes up. So that is where Dynamic Environment Manager, or more frequently just called DEM, it comes into play. So Dynamic Environment Manager, like I explained earlier, it is something that is created and managed through group policy on your domain controller or wherever your group policy is managed. And you create group policies inside of your Active Directory GPO, and those group policies connect back to a set of file shares that are configured for Dynamic Environment Manager. So that when a user logs in and the DEM agent, there's an agent that gets installed on the master image. When a user logs in and pulls a desktop down from an image that has that DEM agent on it, anything that is related to environment management is going to show up on their desktop. So you can manage things inside of Dynamic Environment Manager such as the background color of your desktop or the image on your desktop, whether or not you want to allow users to keep things on their desktop, any group policy related thing you can think of, right? If you want users to be able to create folders, just like I did in this demo, you would do that. If you don't want them to have that ability, you can block that as well. You can even put in there, like if you want your users only to be using Microsoft Edge or IE or whatever it may be, and there's specific bookmarks or folders that you want them to have in their web browser, you can control that all through Dynamic Environment Manager, as well as printer sharing, printer mapping, and file share mapping. All that can be done through Dynamic Environment Manager. So it's a really, really awesome tool, very powerful tool. And again, the whole idea behind these tools like App Volumes and Dynamic Environment Manager is to give that user persistent feel. So the end user doesn't know, they feel like they're getting the same desktop every time. But on the back end, they're getting a brand new desktop every time they log in, and it gets deleted every time they log out.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Greg. That is all we have for today. Thanks for the great questions. Like we've said, please, if you have any questions, reach out to any of the email aliases you see on the screen here today. We do record all of our sessions. So if you'd like to see the session today or any of our past demos that we have done, please go to our website at sterling.com and visit our proven performance page, and you will find all of our recorded demos there. Thank you so much and have a great day.